not touch it. Do not touch it.
Here we go. Okay. All right, good evening, everyone. I'd like to go ahead and call tonight's meeting to order. It's 6 p.m., June 15th, 2026, and this is our first budget workshop. Lori, can we get roll call, please?
Mayor Young,
Here.
Vice Mayor Painter,
Here.
Councilmember Brandon,
Here.
Councilmember Sartori,
Here.
Councilmember Stone.
Here.
Thank you. And the one and only agenda item tonight is to review and discuss the fiscal year 2026-2027 proposed budget. And Jeremy, the floor is yours.
All right, thank you, Mayor, Council. This is kind of, I think I've defined this early as like the all too early budget proposal. So this budget proposal is June. We haven't got our final tax revenues yet, so we're not sure those will be July 1. So what you have tonight is a draft budget that we're providing to council to see if we're on the right track, if there's anything we need to dig deeper in. We do have another meeting scheduled in July that we'll get a little bit deeper in the weeds or some different details if council gives us direction. With that, and most of you guys all know some of this, but I'm gonna just kind of, I guess, reiterate some of this that for anybody that's watching online. But you know, each year we are required to balance a budget. We need to make sure that we set it at maximum ad valorem tax rate. We will do that in July at the July meeting, and so all of our revenues have to match our expenditures. With that, that's in the general fund. We do have several different types of funds, and some people get some of these confused, but the general fund is the one that funds all the services such as police, fire, parks, planning, finance, IT, administration. These are driven by ad valorem, state shared revenues, investment, interest, income, charges for services are all examples of revenues for this fund. Taxes are the main revenue source for this fund. Then we have the enterprise funds. The enterprise funds should be self-supporting. I'd say run like a business, but you set those fees so that way you can they can be self-funded. This is the water utility fund, the stormwater utility, and the refuse and recycling. We also have an internal service fund, which you guys helped set up last year, which is the vehicle replacement fund. This establishes kind of like a smoothing of our vehicles, establish our how often we replace those vehicles, and hopefully it's consistent so we don't have the peaks and valleys when cars need to be replaced. Capital Improvement Fund, this is funded by the water utility tax. In the past, this was funded also by the 1 cent infrastructure surtax. That did sunset. December was our last payment that we received for that, the previous December. So we no longer receive roughly about $670,000 that we were getting that we no longer have to support those capital projects. Out of that $305,000 that we get for utility tax that we put into this fund, we also transfer currently $135,000 is transferred to stormwater to help with some of their improvements and set that budget straight. Other restricted funds, the capital projects fund, and I'm gonna go into what that $1,480,000 represents, but the capital fund is the funds typically, that 303 fund that you see is typically we're taking general fund revenues and putting it into that fund for those capital projects. Really the projects that are in that for this particular year is roads and sidewalks. That's $970,000. I think there's $570,000 for the Old Dixie project that is transferred in from our unassigned fund balance. The building fund, as you guys know, and we do have a meeting scheduled, a special meeting to relook at those fees, but typically the building permit fees, we charge on evaluation by project, and those fees would help support the building fund. We no longer can charge by valuation, so we have to reconsider how we're doing those fees. But all the fees that we get into the building fund for permits need to be able to support the building fund and their operation. Special law enforcement, we get those funds. The revenue for that is through forfeiture funds, and we have a specific statute that governs how we spend those funds, but they got to be basically funding law enforcement activities. Still outstanding items, certified ad valorem, our final health insurance, final property and casualty insurance, and then our non-union salaries. We do have 3% currently in the budget for non-union. We kind of waiting when we established this this budget. That's what we felt like the CPI was 3%, and so that's what currently what we're planning on spending unless council gives us different direction. Decision on the operating millage rate, 6.4595 is our current. That is what the staff is recommending to move forward, is to keep the millage rate the same. Little extra that I put in the budget this year. There's a great quote in the movie Hitch, one of my favorite ones. Basically says you can't really know where you're going until you know where you've been. And so a little bit of just history of how we got here, because there's a lot of narratives out there about increased revenues and some different expenditures, and just so people know where we've typically spent money the last several years. I just wanted to kind of give a couple slides just to summarize some of the things. So a big thing when I was here, when I first got here, was tasked with just community involvement and making sure that we're very transparent with what we do. We've done community surveys, we've done annual budgets, independent audits, strategic plans, vehicle replacement fund, sidewalk improvement plans, road improvement plans, capital improvement plans. Like, we've done these things. They're all documents, they're all available, they're all on our website. If not, you can't access them, you can submit a request to the clerk's office, they'll give you those. That's been the kind of the roadmap that we've had for the village. So starting back in 2019-20, we were $1.3 million under our 2-month operating. So we started out, when I got here, we started out in the hole. We transferred $865,000 from our reserves to cover the budget, just to balance the budget that year. And so budget projections showed that we were under. The policy is, if we're under our 2-month operating, the village manager is required to advise council, and we have to recoup that within 3 years. We were able to do that in 2. Previous councils indicated they weren't aware of that, but it didn't matter. We made that choice and we moved forward. During that same period, right before I got here, so like April of 2019, we also switched from 6-man firefighter shifts to 7-man rotation, 7-man firefighting team. We had some, I guess, reserve officers that we were filling the spots for, and so during that time, the council decided to move to 7-man. So and then we also reverted back to our defined pension plan for police officers. So that did increase the village's pension contribution at that time. We've offset some of that with the 185 money that we received from the state. 2021, we were still, the second year, we were $666,000 under our 2-month operating. We did spend some of the infrastructure surtax money on roads and sidewalks. That was the first road and sidewalk project that we did in over 5 years previously. So we hadn't been doing a lot of road and sidewalks. We had $60,000 annually set aside for road maintenance, and that's how we were filling potholes and doing those types of things. So council did request at the time we do a long-term road and sidewalk funding strategy, which is what we have in place. We've been working for, this is our 3rd year now. We also began the rec center planning design phases, $208,000. We had a building that was basically condemned over at the rec center, so we needed to do something for our citizens for the rec center. 21-22, projected we were $58,000 above our 2-month operating. At that time, council said we need to shoot for 3 months. So while we did finally meet our 2-month operating, we were fine there. The village council also received COVID funding, and in that time we invested in a couple stormwater projects. We took care of the fire department vehicles. We had 2 trucks that were past their life expectancy, and so we spent that COVID money wisely on one-time expenditures. We did have a groundbreaking for the rec center at that time. So our annual debt service that we took on was roughly $450,000. We transitioned to Northcom. There was some upfront costs, but we expected to recoup our investment over a 5-year period. We recouped that investment within 3 years. Began our vehicle replacement for the police department. Before I got here, we borrowed money for police cars and bought them that way. As you guys know, we have a vehicle replacement fund for our police officers now, and so every 4 or 5 years, we're replacing those vehicles on a regular basis to give our officers the tools needed to do their job. Oh, we also started the planning for Remembrance Park, which was roughly around $100,000. 22-23, we transitioned to an 8-man fire department shifts. We hired one additional firefighter with the intent that every year we were going to hire one more additional one. We completed approximately $773,000 in road projects. And we also, at this time, and I believe it was Vice Mayor Stone at the time, but Kyle Stone, Councilmember Stone, thought that it would be a good idea to take the money that we get from Palm Beach County and set it aside for a vehicle replacement fund for large vehicles. And that set us kind of on this conversation of why don't we do this for all vehicles? And so we take our Palm Beach County, so we basically took our revenue, $124,000, and started plugging that toward a vehicle replacement fund. 23-24, we did reduce the millage rate from 6.629 to 6.4595. Most of our revenue at that time was really resulted from new construction. We had the sea glass that came online, and then we established ongoing infrastructure policies. So we established a policy that our road and sidewalks would be funded from our general fund moving forward. And so we were able to set aside some of that new revenue from sea glass to make sure our roads and sidewalks were taken care of for a period of time for the village. Planning for future expiration of the surtax. At that point, we knew we were going to be losing the $650,000. We did establish the community development department. The NZ consultants had switched companies. The quote that we got was going to be more than what we could do it in-house, so we brought an in-house development department, and then we continued 8-man fire department. Instead of hiring one firefighter the next year, we went ahead and hired 2 of them so we can go ahead and get to the 8-man shifts. And then we started incurring those recreation expenses, and then we made an investment in Remembrance Park. 24-25, we established the vehicle-wide vehicle replacement fund, allocated matching funds for Sequesta Park improvements through the appropriation through the state, and then we obviously maintained competitive salaries and benefits. We had the public safety union negotiations, and so we matched some of those contributions, health insurance costs, competitive wages. Takes us to where we are today with our current year that we're in. 2025-26 highlights. We have remodeled the village hall, our village annex. It's supposed to be completed this year. This was split between the police department, the building department, and the general fund. We do have our code enforcement and building department is over there, as well as we do have some classes for police, and then our general fund did take on some of those expenditures. Street improvements and sidewalks was funded. The village clerk's office started using AI to supplement minute creation. I think it was more of just a whole initiative that the village taken on, trying to figure out where we can be more efficient using AI for different things. And I think the clerk's office has been kind of a leader with that, especially on our website and with the minutes. Finance began doing that to help with some staff time. And then field maintenance, removed the ADA compliant dugouts out at Sequesta Park. We've been slowly kind of chewing away at Sequesta Park with some projects. Not owning it before, it was always kind of it was a tough decision on how much money we were going to spend out there. As we move forward, we'll see. That's obviously going to be a different conversation with the taxes, but I think it's every dollar we spend out there is our dollar, and it's our park now. So. Other successful things, we've migrated to 365 here in the village. We had that mobility planning effort that kind of got halted a little bit because of Senate Bill 180, but part of that was funded by grants. We established a vehicle replacement fund in our second year, and then the new K9 unit came aboard. Not a lot of cost, still a highlight for us though. PD computers, new community programs such as the gun safety course and the boater safety course. The PD does a great job, and I think most of it's usually funded by grants or others, so we don't have a huge expense for those. Electronic knock boxes, those are where the fire department can go into a commercial building, grab the key, go in. We were able to do electronic knock boxes, so we don't have to have 100 keys laying around. They can go in, go right to it with a fob. And then the fire department trailer, and then starting After July 4th, the bridge maintenance program will start. That was infrastructure surtax. The sales tax money is $950,000 investment to fix that bridge. We haven't done any maintenance or very little maintenance to that bridge since it got installed back in the day. So I think it's like 17, 18 years old with very little investment. So that gets us to kind of where we are tonight. So I just wanted to kind of set that tone a little bit. We're in the 26-27 budget process. Our budget process for staff, it goes all year round. So we're always monitoring every month, department heads, and most time in the staff meeting, they're reporting where they are with their budget, where they are with overtime, where they are with their expenditures, anything coming up. And so we're monitoring all those things. And then in January, we start the new budget process. So we're really working on two budgets at kind of the same time. And so in January, the budget calendar sent. March and April, meeting with department heads, finance. Starting May, we start getting into some deeper conversation. And here we are today in June, submitting our proposed budget to the village council. Really, July is where we'll probably give you guys the the closer to official version, because we'll have our revenues from the ad valorem revenue, that we'll have that and be able to provide that to you guys. And then we have the two public hearings that I think those dates are already set for September. We will have to set the maximum tax rate in July. So we are proposing to keep the millage rate the same, 6.4595. I'll highlight this a little bit in a minute. This is the slide showing that we've been consistent over time. Total millage rate has went down over time, whether it's the county or other entities that have lowered their millage rate. We've lowered our millage rate back in 23, 24. But you've seen the millage rate typically has went down, our total millage rate, and while the village has stayed pretty consistent along the way. So with a current millage rate, if it stays the same, the average homeowner will see a $9 increase per month for their taxes if the CPI is at 3%. It's CPI or 3% or whichever is lower. And so with a 3% increase, that's what the millage rate, that's what the average home payer would pay at $618,000. I love this slide because it shows that, the village, we're right in the middle. Our total millage rate is right in the middle of Palm Beach County. But we're only one of 9, I think it's 10 now, because I think Highland Beach now has a police and a fire. We're one of only 10 municipalities that have their own police, fire, and water. One of 14 municipalities their own fire and police. So very proud of that. And if you look at like the blue, those are the ones that have their own fire and police, and we're right in the middle of those as well. So we've stayed pretty consistent, really tried to give the best value for our residents, and I think this slide shows that. Estimated revenues, you'll see a majority of our revenue, 66%, comes from property taxes. You got the intergovernmental revenue, which is kind of your municipal sharing revenue, your alcohol, beverage, your sales tax. You got your other taxes, which is your utility tax, communication services, charges for service is your JIC, Palm Beach County, the money we receive for those, for providing fire service. So you'll see that a majority, the highlight of the slide, majority of our revenue comes from property taxes. So these next 3 slides are really slides kind of showing the same thing, but kind of different way. So this first one is the percent change, or the number change from year to year per department. So you'll see, several departments have either went down or have stayed pretty consistent. Most of you'll see the biggest, increases is fire, police, information technology are kind of the big ones, and I'm going to go a little bit in depth with that. The highlight on this slide, though, is really the $483,486 on the other non-operating. That is the money that we're recommending put into unassigned fund balance, because it's not allocated for any expenses in our budget. However, that would be the money that you could lower the taxes, and that was kind of our plan. That's what the council has been working toward, really setting ourselves up for the future with vehicle replacement fund, the road and sidewalk money, the investments that we've made. It was always the plan to continue down that path so we can lower our millage rate. So we're at that point. However, with all the property tax stuff, Staff's not recommending that we do that at this point, just because of the impacts of that property tax is really going to hurt, and we're going to have to make some tough decisions. And so by lowering the millage rate at this point, we'll only, I think, add to that. But we serve the council, and whatever the council decide, I think tonight would be the first time you guys really get a chance to discuss any of that future property tax implications. But just wanted to highlight that's the number that we have not assigned to any budget item. Next slide just kind of shows the adopted of 26 versus the adopted of 27. Very similar, your relative percentage. So really, most of the percentage stayed the same. Police actually dropped in their relative percentage to the budget, and fire went up a little bit. I think IT went up a little bit, but for the most part, those are your percentages, and they've been pretty consistent over time. This slide represents what the average home payer pays for the services. So if you look at the very far right column on this one, the average taxpayer is paying, $153 for finance. Just pick one. I mean, you can go down the line, but roughly you're paying $839 for police, $1,000 for fire. So it's just broken out by what you pay per department. What I like to do, and some of you guys that have seen my presentation for the Residence Academy, I like to kind of show and put a comparison to it. So I've extended it and look at some of my favorite drinks at one of our local coffee shops. Caramel Ribbon Crunch Frappuccino right off the app is $6.25, and just a cup of coffee is $2.95. If you look at our services compared to that, our police service is $2.35 a day for the resident, with an average response time of 1 minute. So that's, fantastic. Not too many municipalities, I think, can do that. We do a very good job of keeping the costs down, but still providing a high level of service. Look at fire service, $2.91 a day. So, and they have an average response time of 4 minutes, which is below the national average, I think, or the, whatever the NAPA standards are, 4.5 minutes. If you look at all the other departments, admin, human resources, village clerk, general government, finance, legal, comprehensive plan, information, code compliance, public works, that same caramel ribbon crunch frappuccino, we provide all those other services for $377 a day. And then so the public safety combined is $526 for roughly $9 a day. You get all the services of the village. And so I think we do an excellent job of providing those services. Just another little look at it. Most of your expenses are tied up into really your four big departments, and that's fire department is 28%, police department is 22%, public works with some of the expenditures they have, and then you guys just got a presentation from Greg and leisure services, and applauded the job that he did, but their budget is 6% of our total budget. Expenditures, you'll see, and there's a common theme. There's a couple more slides I think we'll highlight, but a majority of our expenditures are really caught up in either recurring costs like utilities, things like that, utilities, roads, just off the top of my head. But the other big part of it is salaries and wages, employee benefits. So you're looking at 64% of our total expenditures are people. Another look at really the same thing. 2/3 of our cost are personnel cost, and the other part is the operating. This is broken down by the actual funds. We'll start getting into a little bit of the other funds like building and water, but this breaks down the total budget, total per fund. Some of the highlights for the 26-27 budget: property tax revenues up 6%, mainly due to sales and new construction. Major changes to the homestead benefits are proposed. The voters will be asked to ratify during the election this November. TPD was awarded a $100,000 stipend from the feds for immigration, to work with the feds on immigration. So they gave us $100,000 stipend for the vehicles. We're using that money into our vehicle replacement fund to help purchase a couple of police cars or a police car and a half. They also have planned, and we did not have it in the budget now because when we were developing the budget, we hadn't got the official word, but we're expecting a quarterly payment for our officers to help offset some of our costs for that. We're expecting $35,000 a quarter from the feds. We don't know how long this will last. We don't have a long-term agreement in place, but for now, it's a good source of revenue for our police and help. We have a major upgrade to our radio system that has to be done the next couple of years in the amount of $300,000. So the recommendation is to take that $35,000, hold it aside, and use it toward that expenditure. Per council direction, staff has included $570,000 in reserve for the Old Dixie beautification. Well, I think we heard that in May, or maybe it was April. 70,000 of that 570 is the planning part, and we've already initiated the plans. Palm Beach County has agreed. I don't know if it's been ratified yet, but they've agreed to pay for half of those costs. The other 500,000 is construction. My recommendation, well, even if the plans come in tomorrow, my recommendation, we don't start construction until after we find out what's going on with the property taxes in November. So we won't bring you guys any kind of construction contract until after we find out what's going on with property taxes. We're proposing increasing our system maintenance to upgrade our ERP system with BSNA. This is kind of the hub for finance and building and customer service billing. We use that system. Basically, it's an on-premise system, just like our Microsoft system. They're basically stop with any kind of upgrades to that system, and over time they're going to phase that out. So we are recommending going to the cloud. We'll have some savings on an annual contract because we are going to the cloud. We roughly have 2 or 3 years probably before they just discontinue it. So we thought it'd be best to have that savings, but also start to lean that forward so we can have a smooth transition into that system. We are proposing increasing the computer maintenance $17,000 to upgrade our Laserfish to the cloud. There are some additional benefits to Laserfish, but we've, over the last year or two, we've had some licensing issues. We're only limited so many. We've had some online issues, people being able to get online. So we feel like this will help, and so we are proposing to upgrade that system to the cloud. I think there's even some AI features that helps you with some search things. I didn't do the actual the demo for it, but I hear that's really the way to do it with Laserfish. If you guys don't know, Laserfish is our software that we keep all of our records, all of our meeting records, all of our contracts, resolutions, everything is housed in there. Any resident, any point can search through Laserfish and find what they're looking for. And if they can't, they can always contact the clerk's office, and the clerk's office can go through that and help them. We are proposing to continue with our street program, $710,000 for that program, and then we are proposing to move our $170,000 that we typically put aside for sidewalk improvements to move to $200,000. With the cost of sidewalks going up, we're getting less for our dollars. So the $200,000, we're trying to make sure we can kind of stay ahead of the curve, stay up with maintenance of those sidewalks. And then we are proposing to continue with the concert series. This last year we put $50,000 in the budget to kind of celebrate the 250-year celebration. And so we had a concert series. It was very well received, a lot of good comments. So we are proposing putting that back in and continuing that on an annual basis. As you guys know, we used to do the food trucks, having a lot of trouble, getting the food trucks to show up on time, have enough food. And so this is probably a little easier path of resistance for us to do it this way. We do have a 9% increase for health insurance costs. It's a placeholder. We are unsure at this point what that looks like, but we feel like 9% is a reasonable placeholder. We hope to get that under, have some additional savings when we get to that point. Per contract, we do have a 6.5% increase for PBA in the second year. And then per contract, the firefighters have an 8.15% in the third year of the contract. We propose increase in non-resident salaries by 3%, and then move to the Civic Plus Agenda software. As you guys know, we use iCompass now. The biggest benefit to Civic Plus Agenda software, in my mind, is we have to make all of our documents ADA compliant. And I think we have another year to do that, or 2 years to do that. This software allows, there's software that's incorporated into this with Civic Plus that allows us to help check to make sure our website's ADA compliant, all of our agenda meetings, minutes, all that's ADA compliant. So there's an additional benefit there. Every year we'll probably see the difference between iCompass and Civic Plus is about a $4,000 difference. So we'll see a little bit of a recurring cost increase, but the cost that we're going to have to pay to bring a lot of our documents ADA compliant is far outweighs the $4,000. So we are making that recommendation to bring that. And then also included in this budget, I think, is $54,000 for improvements to replace our AC for the public safety building. And so that's a pretty large cost that I think it's past its useful life. I think it's been the same AC since we built that building and opened it. And then we do have some expenditure, I think it's $29,000 in some Constitution Park playground maintenance. We have several fittings and things out there that are rusted and need to be replaced. So we're taking kind of a small couple pieces to try to replace. You guys will see in the 5-year capital plan, we do have, and it started a couple of years ago, we have $1 million set aside, or not set aside, but planning for $1 million in Tequesta Park renovations. Those playgrounds are 19 or 20 years old, never been replaced, and so we need to really start looking at the useful life of those playgrounds, and it's estimated at $1 million to replace those 2 playgrounds out there. This slide just shows kind of a comparison of where we are with village employees versus the national average, and I think the two worth highlighting is the police staffing. We are 3.26 officers per thousand. The benchmark is 2.4, so we're above the average for the number of police officers. Part of this is that we have a minimum. We're a small department, so to be able to put, we need to have at least 3 and a boss on a shift, and so you'll see that we typically have that or even above that, but there are days when people call out or whatever the duty is. We need to be able to provide that service and that minimum staffing. Fire staffing, we're kind of right where we need to be. We're 1.14 duty firefighters per thousand. The national rate is 1.75, so just under that, but I think for our department, it seems to work, and that's been kind of the number that's worked for us in the last 2 years since we went to the eight firefighters per shift. This slide just shows kind of where our expenses have been trending and over the years. You'll see the salaries is kind of the biggest one. I don't think that we're alone in this. I think, after when you start hitting that post-COVID times, everybody in Palm Beach County, and not even just government, but a lot of municipalities, a lot of private business started seeing salaries start to increase. We've never led that field. We always kind of follow, and so our salaries are very competitive. We're not number one. But we also have always strive not to be the last. So we try to be competitive in that market. General operating costs have went up. I think we can highlight some of those, but and then of course benefits. Everybody has seen those increased benefits as well. Some of the development history, you guys I think have seen this slide before. Just some of the things that have caused that revenue to go up with some of the bigger projects. Large projects, this is kind of the negative to the other slide. We don't really have a lot in the hopper as far as big projects. We have a couple out there, nothing projected for 26, nothing projected by 27. We do have a couple under consideration. I say consideration because they have not been vetted by council, haven't been approved per se. Hawks Cove has, obviously with that development, that annexation, but they have not submitted any building plan, so it's still under consideration on that side of it. Preserve, they may have some additional buildings come online. We don't know if they're going to make the January 2027, so we're projecting them for 28. And then, of course, the BOA is still working through that process, that consideration. Country Club has been vetted through council. However, they're still working through building plans and established timelines. I know they've had some, from what I hear, they've had some permitting issues through South Florida Water Management District that has slowed that process down a little bit. So this is where we get in a little bit of the projections with everything that we got in the budget. Today, we're projecting well. We talked about, probably lower taxes as we move forward, with our increases. This does show, if you look, and I don't have a pointer that'll show up on that screen, but it does show Jeff will do it for us. It does show a negative $186,000 negative. The reason why it shows a negative this year because we're using $570,000 out of our unassigned fund balance for Old Dixie. So we're actually positive, the $486,000, but just wanted to show that's why it's showing a negative. And then we're also trending well the next several years. I did want to talk a little bit, and I don't, obviously we'll give it to council in whichever direction you want to go with this. We kind of hedged a little bit against the property tax stuff with not putting any new initiatives or even some of the strategic initiatives in there that council had talked about and previously approved in the strategic plan. However, I did want to talk a little bit about the Florida property tax, and maybe this is an opportunity to just make sure everybody has the facts of what this really is and what it really does. So it does expand the homestead exemption for non-school tax. So your schools will not be affected. School taxes, you will still be charged your full rate for the school taxes that you are today. It is supposed to go to, by 2028, it'll go to $250,000. The part that also is not said and not sung enough is that it will continue to go up for inflation. And so you'll see in one of our next slides, and when we project, you're going to see that we continue to kind of sink into a hole because we're going up 3% or CPI, whichever is higher at that point. And so it is pretty significant. So if you just look at the tax bill for Tequesta residents, most of these are on there. There's a couple that may not be, but it is going to affect your library services, your children's services, Find, Jupiter Inlet District, Healthcare District, the county fire, which, we don't have that one per se. However, it might have an impact on the revenue that they pay us because they're going to have less. So that contract is up in 2027 that we're going to have to renew with them for them to pay us for fire services for the unincorporated area. The county general operating, South Florida Water Management District, and then of course our Tequesta operating budget. New Florida residents generally have to wait 5 years for the larger extension. What I'm seeing is, and they'll also be able to bring portability, what I'm seeing is there's going to be, I think there's a general consensus, there's going to be a trend of people that are using Florida as their second properties to make Florida their first properties, and they're going to homestead those. So we're at 60% homestead. There's going to projection that is going to rise, that percentage of homestead will go up, which in theory will affect our revenue even more. We didn't really project that in our 10-year because we don't know what that number looks like, but there's just a general feeling out there that it's going to continue to climb. Does lower the annual assessment growth cap from 10% to 5%. So your multifamily or commercial properties, if their value is under what the assessed value, they could actually go up all the way up to 10% or a new owner or a change out. Now it's capped at 5%. So when we look at, the increases that we've seen in our ad valorem, that number is going to be lower. Those commercial properties help drive our increased revenue in ad valorem. Sea glasses, the Austrade buildings, things like that. That's drove. Those are going to be capped at 5% now instead of 10%. And so we're going to see basically a lower ad valorem increase. It does restrict county and municipal properties. So during and this is a long-winded version of summarizing this, but during the legislation process, you could only use that revenue from ad valorem, this was proposed in the bill, for only like 5 different reasons. So they limited that you can only use it for police, fire, I forget the other ones off the top of my head, because at the end of the day, they took that out and they said, you can use it for all of your services as long as it's allowed by law and your governmental entity approves it. So basically, the same thing that we're doing now, we can continue to do it the way that we're doing it, the way that I reworded it. However, be prepared in the future, because they said allowed by general law. It means that they can change the general law through a statute and they don't have to go back through Constitution Amendment. So I think what they did is they tried to kick the can down the road. All right, you guys want to have concerns about the specific uses, we'll just allow everything by general law. And now they can come back by legislation and change the general law. So they may come back and restrict what we can use those funds are. There is a misnomer out there that you can, police and fire is protected. You won't be able to touch those. Absolutely not. There's nothing in there that protects police and fire. There's no replacement funding for police and fire. It is all tied up in the same revenue loss that we're going to be losing when this happens, if it happens. And so that one, when I look and scour like the social media and things out there, there's a lot of people that say, oh, they won't touch our police and fire. Well, I mean, they're going to be affected by revenue just like the rest of the services, and so we'll have to prioritize those funding efforts. So what that means for the village, and you guys, I've sent you guys probably 20 emails because there was a whole bunch of different stuff going around. But this is the one that we're projecting. We're using the appraisal district. The county appraiser sent this to us, and so with 2027, we're expected to lose $1.9 million from the homestead exemption, and then by 2028, we're going to lose $3.2 million. And so the percentage of expenditures that we currently have right now is about 62% is personnel cost. Percentage of police, fire, and debt service is a little bit more than half, because debt service has to be paid. We can't not pay debt service. So it's pretty significant. The other one that's kind of eye-opening for me was that 746 properties will fall under the $250,000 exemption. So there will be 746 out of 3,400 that will pay zero taxes. We will still show up and provide police services. We still show up to provide fire services. We still pave their roads. We still have code compliance, but they won't have to pay for those services. So just something to I guess ponder. The amount to recover lost expenditures, if we, I know we'll have some budget tightening conversations, but if it was to pass, if we were to raise the millage rate to cover those expenditures, that would be the difference in the proposed millage rate to cover without any adjustments to reducing expenditures. So taking that number and projecting those numbers onto our 5-year, Jeff, will you be a finger again and show that, we're still showing the negative for this year, but as you move forward, you get into that 2027 number, the first year is 600 and I can't even read the numbers on it. Okay. And then so the next year you get into $1.6 million, then 1.9, 2.4, and then 2. It continues to grow because of that inflation number that's on there. We continue to see the negative on that, and there's not really an end in sight at that point. And so staff has some recommendations, but those conversations will obviously lead into some future workshops as well. Where we sit in our unassigned fund balance, as I started this presentation talking about where we've come from, back in 2019, we're $1.3 million under. We've done some good things. And every year there's less expenditures and we get some revenue that we didn't anticipate. And so we're able to every year to put a little bit of money into this pot to grow this. We are expecting in 27 to be at $2.5 million. If property tax does pass, this will help smooth it out, but we got to be careful that we don't use these expenditures for recurring costs. One-time expenditures, if you start using this to cover your recurring costs, at some point you're going to run out. Do you want to take a break and ask questions on the general fund? You want me to just fire through with building and water?
I say keep going. What do you guys?
I'm fine, go. Yeah.
Okay. So building fund, pretty
Unless you
easy.
need a break.
No, I'm good. No, I'm good. The building fund's a little easier. A couple slides. You know, we have a budget of $1,360,000. Permit fees $586,000. We are looking at how we're going to what our revenue will look like with the new fee structure. I mean, we hope to still recoup 100% of our costs for this. We have a proposal for you guys. And we do plan to expend some of our fund balance reserves for that. As you guys know, if we don't spend those, if we have to carry too much, we have to get back to developers or look at how we expend those. So we feel like we're in a good position still, even after we go through and we spend $622,000 of that fund. We still project that we're going to be $287,000 to the good. We will look at this, especially this year, and make sure that we're recouping those costs. Back in 2019, we were doing a 2% valuation, and we lowered it to 1%, and then we changed our land development fees. Our plan coming back in the future was to raise those percentages back up to the 1.5 or 2% to make sure that we were balanced and balanced budget. But we've done really well every year. We seem to come in over our projections for revenue and always seem to be under on our expenditures. So we feel good about where we're at, and we'll continue to monitor it every year. Enterprise funds, water utility fund, refuse and recycling, and stormwater. The highlights, and I don't know if it's a highlight, but our proposed increase per contract for waste management contract is 4.71%. That is a non-ad valorem assessment. Refuse and recycling, what we're projecting at the end of this year, as you guys know, we were down to like $14,000 or what our projection was. We feel like we're trying to build that net position just back up just a little bit, and then hopefully as we move forward, you know, we will take Waste Management's contract rate or even under, or as we negotiate other rates, hopefully we can make sure we're trying to find some savings in there. But at current rate, we think our net position will be well at the end of 27. Water fund. Completion of 3 large capital projects: the water filtration, water filter rehabilitation, the reverse osmosis membrane, water main number 1 on Tequesta Drive, which, you know, one of these days it's going to be over. I think they're going to start putting some sod in, I think tomorrow. So I cherish that day where it'll look better. But great project as far as, you know, the future of the village. Hopefully, you know, we put those pipes in, we won't have to worry about them for another 100 years. Implementation of the hydrant maintenance program, tracking and documentation, the hydrant conditions, some portable, reliable firefighting service, and then development of water treatment master plan. You guys got the whole draft presentation from Allison and the consultant at the last meeting. That was a highlight of getting that done. I think one of the initiatives that Allison brings up on these slides, which you know, I just love and warms my heart, is that she's really taken a data decision making process when we were rehabbing our wells or any maintenance to it. In the past, we'd be like, all right, at 20 years, I think we probably should rehab our wells. Now they're really looking at performance and making those decisions on which well is getting rehab based on the performance of those wells. So I think she's done a really good job of the data-driven decision-making process. Increased technology utilization. We are modernizing that SCADA software and upgrade. I think that would be really big for our system, just to bring us into the modern age. She is doing a good job pursuing funding opportunities. You know, some of this funding that we're getting is the SRF funding, which is very low interest rates for doing some of these projects. I know she's, you know, scouring for grants and other opportunities. I think the next biggest one is really some of the loan forgiveness, SRF funding. Hopefully we can get some of that, because we do have some major projects still coming for the water treatment plant coming up. And then increased customer outreach. I think she's done a really good job. The water department as a whole has done a really good job reaching out and trying to do as much as they can on just education. You guys saw, I mean, just the darling kids that were at the council meeting, you know, just seeing the education and some of the new things that they're doing over here. I think it's been great. Projected net position, and so starting 25, we're at $15 million. We used some of our capital to fund some of that, and so when we hit 26, or when we projected at the end of 26 to be a little bit under that, $14 million, and you look at our use of our revenue versus expenditures and the use of our fund balance there, we're right about where we project to be, right about where we are at the end of 26. We do have some large projects, so somebody sees like, well, you have $14 million. First, it helps us with some interest and be able to get some investments in there, but we do have some major projects coming that we hope to be able to pay go instead of issuing debt for. Revenue projections, you'll see that this slide matches the next one, which is the expenditures, but it's kind of broken down on where those revenues come from. And then the next slide will be kind of where those expenditures go, what, you know, in administration, production, distribution, customer service, renewal, replacement, and then the capital project capital improvement fund. So we are expected to get some debt proceeds, some SRF funding for the water treatment plant and water main project, and be able to, we'll also have those same expenditures for those accounts. The ongoing projects, and I know Allison's been out and her team has been out. I keep saying Allison, but I know her team does a lot as well. Doing presentations for that. That's coming in the next month or so. The Beach Road, doing that water main replacement. Jupiter in the Pines is another large water main project that's coming. That has not been funded. We are going to the August meeting for inclusion to hopefully get funded for that project through the SRF funding. If it does, we'll be mobilizing March or April, February, March, April next year. We'll have a couple of decision points for council to approve that contract. That'll be coming like November, December. And then the superficial well rehabilitation, the water raw main, the pigging, and then the water treatment plant efficiency upgrades. Stormwater fund, we did complete the Dover Ditch living shoreline in partnership with Jupiter. And then we lined roughly or approximately 318 feet of stormwater drainage pipes. And then we did regrade approximately 3,270 feet of that. This next year, the initiatives are to implement the asset management platform to improve system tracking and maintenance, pursue funding opportunities, including grants to support major capital investments. We are planning on lining 153 linear feet of stormwater pipe, and that's over in the Gulfview Drive area, and then 615 feet of linear feet swells from Beacon Street to Evergreen. Projected unrestricted net position for the stormwater, you'll see at the bottom line at the end of 27, we are projected 316,000. We are holding back some of our expenditures so that we can try to build up this reserve a little bit. As you guys know, this was always the one and still is the concern for the village. We don't want to have to, you know, implement any kind of capital charge or really raise the fees, you know, more than the CPI or the normal increase that we do every year. So we're trying to hold some money back to try to build up reserves. So if we do have an emergency expenditure, we aren't using general funds to cover those. We'll have some funds in the stormwater, some monies in the stormwater fund. You guys have this in your backup. It might be easier to read it, but these are our capital projects that we have lined out. It's our capital improvement plan. You'll see in the very top section, the total general fund revenues. Those are all of our expenditures that we're funding with the general fund. So you'll see, you know, the $710,000 for road and the $200,000 for sidewalks. We do have the Lucas compression device for fire department, and we do have under the equipment purchases a trailer for public works. As you get into the second category, you have that infrastructure surtax and utility tax funding. As you guys know, that infrastructure surtax is, we no longer receive revenues. We still have some funds built into there And those are our estimated expenditures. We don't feel like we'll have much money after those, but you'll see the $300,000 that we have set aside in there for the radios that we're not touching, so that way we have those funds available. If we do get that $35,000 per quarter, or roughly $140,000 a year, we'd set that aside, and that would help us release that $300,000 for some other capital expenditures. The next category is what we're using from reserves to fund some of those projects. And so you'll see Old Dixie, and then you'll see those other building improvements. So those haven't been a priority for us. We do have them in our 5-year plan. Every year we put those projects in our ML, what do you call it, Doug? LMS, for some funding. So if there is some funding available, we can get some of those building improvements done, like impact windows. I think there's generator in there. I don't remember all the projects, but those projects are not critical to the village. We'd love to be able to do those, especially if we can be a part of that program and get some funding for them. So, and then you get into some of the stormwater fund. The stormwater fund expenditures through the capital are next. And then going into the last page, you'll see some of the water treatment, or the utility fund, and what their expenditures are. So our vehicle replacement fund, our proposed purchases. The vehicle patrol vehicles, we typically try to replace those on a 5-year cycle. The police pickup truck is 10 years old. We do have that. The police COP's vehicle, we have $30,000 set aside for that. I think one of our plans is to take the building vehicle that we have for the building official that is replaced at 6 years. We will have to depreciate that value and pay the building fund. So it may not be $30,000. We just estimate because that was the purchase price. But we plan on giving the COPs an SUV that the building department is, and so we'll be able to get that at a discounted rate. And then the 2 water utility trucks. This next slide is kind of the start of what I always do every year, is matching our budgeting to what we've strategically planned for. And I promise I'm getting close to the end. Budgeting strategically, so there's 4 categories that we have: operated fiscally responsible government. The only one that was in this category was what we talked about, was a non-ad valorem assessment for fire. We talked about it, and we decided we were going to hold off on that until after we decided what was going to happen with property taxes. Well, now we have a pretty good idea where we're heading with that. I do think that we should really consider this as kind of the future of the village, and what we look at when we're losing revenues. We should be able to recoup some of these costs through a non-ad valorem assessment. And then if property taxes doesn't do what it needs, that we think it's going to do, we don't have to implement, or we can reduce the millage rate by the same cost of the non-ad valorem assessment. And so I do think we should consider this in the near future. I am looking at having a consultant come in and just give a presentation on what non-ad valorem assessment would mean for us and for the village. And so that was priority 8 on our strategic plan. However, I'd like to see us, or at least entertain the idea or have discussion about moving that forward. Some of the other priorities: so protect community appearance, character, and identity. Council priority initiatives was Tequesta Park redevelopment. We still have not got a probable cost. He sent me an email saying that they're having trouble getting their subs to give them final cost. He did estimate that it's going to be more when we break it into phases. He did tell me this, and he said he's probably estimating $4 to $5 million per phase. So similar to what we had talked about before, we just don't have any solid numbers. There's nothing budgeted at this point for Tequesta Park redevelopment. Consider Remembrance Park Phase 3. We talked about the developer matching $125,000. We'd match $125,000. We have not put anything in writing with that developer. We have not budgeted for it. However, if we do move forward with this, we can pull that from unassigned fund balance My recommendation would be to see if we can further develop that conversation with developer, and we'll bring that back to council for consideration, and then you guys could decide how we want to fund that project. Beautification Old Dixon, that is included in this budget with using unassigned fund balance. Consider Remembrance Park Phase 2, that's priority 6 in our strategic plan. However, we didn't budget for this. We put it in the strategic plan the last couple of years. The next step is really the planning stage, which is estimated $125,000. The estimated project cost for that is $1.2 million. We have not budgeted for this. Any and all of these items council can consider. My suggestion would be figure out what happens in November and then come back in November. And if the property tax, maintains, stays the same and doesn't get passed, then we can consider some of these items and how we fund those in a future conversation. Consider tree planting Phase 2. This has been in our strategic plan or our capital plan for the last 5 years, and it's kind of shifted. So we still have this funded, Phase 2. It was always to be funded after the water main 1 project, and so we're getting close to that. And so the next year, in theory, we would fund that the planting of trees along Tequesta Drive and kind of that second phase. I do know there's been conversation about considering that or even holding off on that one at this point. And so I did, might be one to bullet point for us to discuss tonight, and how you guys want to move forward with that. But it is planned to get paid for out of the infrastructure surtax that we have available. And infrastructure surtax and utility tax, it's kind of a mix. County line beautification, that's the one that we were working with Martin County. This has been put on hold, obviously, because of property taxes. They were working on a conceptual design for us, and so currently this is kind of on hold, so I don't know if we'll be able to pick this up back after November or not. FEC right-of-way beautification, I know this one was also added after we talked about the medians, also continuing with the right-of-way beautification. I think for us, we haven't funded it yet, but I think we'll continue to try to move forward, get maybe a rendering in place, and then even look at having more in-depth conversation with FEC and those costs. But my recommendation would wait until after November for that as well. Last one, deliver, sustain high-quality municipal infrastructure and services. You'll find the first two are kind of our invest in critical infrastructure, reliability, high-quality water system. Those systems, you'll see that we've made some investments with our capital improvement plan. Stormwater resilience through funding, we've made some investments there. I think we still have a ways to go, but I think we're making some strides there. The mobility plan, the connectivity projects, is priority 7. I know that there was a desire to, even if we don't do one of those major projects in the mobility plan, is look for connectivity projects. We have put together a connectivity project or a sidewalk project with Dover Road and the 3 streets funneling in that. We estimate the cost for that to be $400,000 with an estimated engineering cost of $30,000. I think the biggest challenge with that, if we decide to move forward with that, is really just educating our public. We do have to take back some right of way over there on Dover, and so that's always painful when you talk about that. But that if council wants that project, we're looking at $430,000 in cost for that new connectivity project. And then mobility assessment, because of Senate Bill 1A, we are limited on that. But we were expecting, if we wanted to initiate a mobility impact fee, that estimated cost is around $100,000. We have not budgeted for that at this point either. And then there's some safety enhancements that were part of the mobility plan. We had, like Willow. We still have to work on some estimated costs for that if council wants to move forward with that or wait. Some other items that are not included in the budget, we've been doing that $10,000 for either adopt a tree or tree giveaway project. We did not fund that. Neither one of those projects have been very successful. We are talking about doing a tree giveaway project, our plan in the next month or so, because we have those funds budgeted. But currently we don't have them budgeted in the 26-27 budget. And then obviously just wanted to show and highlight that we still do have over $1 million in expenditures for Constitution Park coming, and just be mindful of that and really try to lean forward on that, because if we're using general fund revenues to fund some of our capital projects, we will have to consider that. Next steps in the process, Palm Beach County property appraisers certify our taxable values by July 1st. We will need to set the rates for stormwater, solid waste, annual rates at the first meeting in July for submission to Palm Beach County appraiser. The deadline for each is the end of July. Village Council will set the maximum millage rate to be used at the first meeting in July. This rate cannot be exceeded and must be filed by the early August for the trim. So when we get to the July decision, you can set the maximum tax rate. From there, at the next meeting, you can always go down, you just can't go up. So, if we set the maximum tax rate at the current rate, 6.45, and then through discussion, you guys decide you guys want to lower the millage rate, we always can. But it'd be a recommendation to set the millage rate at 6.4595. But, the council can decide what you guys want to do with that. Continued consideration, these are just kind of some of the things. Obviously, the economy, it's performing pretty well. We've been doing extremely well. I say Jeff and the finance department with investments. So we have been receiving a lot of revenue from investments as the economy kind of cools off. Just be mindful of that. Health insurance cost continues to rise, and the state says we're going to see some property insurance relief. Only time will tell, but hopefully, because those prices continue to rise. Fuel prices has remained high. Hopefully, we'll see some relief from that soon. Salaries and benefits, we just continue to be market competitive. We're kind of like lag in the field. We never want to be the leaders. We love to be the leaders, but from the budgeting standpoint, we always just try to make sure that we stay competitive. Property tax, the legislative process, and the property tax, that's obviously on the forefront. And then capital needs, with that sunset of the surtax, we just need to be mindful that most of our expenditures we're paying for capital moving forward are going to be from the general fund taxes. And so that'll be significant. Don't need to go into it. I have it available, but a couple of slides. This was just showing the Dover Road connectivity project. And then the side roads that go with that. But with that, I turn it over to you guys for discussion and any future direction you want to give council. So this is very preliminary. This is kind of the first step. If you want future discussion teed up, we can do that. If you want some additional information, provide that. But at this point, we're turning the budget over to you guys.
Thank you, Jeremy. Council, I'll open it up for discussion.
Not a whole lot of feedback. I am in agreement with where we are and your recommendations. But you answered any of my questions when we had our agenda review, so I don't really have anything. It's a tough position to be in. Jeff's and the village has done a great job, keep putting us where we are. And we've got a little bit of wiggle room, but I'd like to see us take that 483,000 and add it to the unassigned reserves, just for, you never know. And then if, depending on what happens, and maybe somehow we can figure out how to get it back to the residents at some point. So, but I like what I'm seeing.
No comment right now. I'm good.
So I'm going back to when I was managing a concrete pipe facility in Oklahoma during 2008, 2009. I really wish I had a year and a half lead up time to make decisions about a financial impact. I probably would have done things differently than having to terminate positions and so forth. So with that being said, when you think of that, we potentially have a revenue decline coming our way. I think we should do anything we can this year to address that or try to get ahead of it. I don't know what that is, but I do think we should try to do something as much as we can, because I feel like this will pass and we will have to come up with another, what was it, $700,000 next year and almost $2 million the following year. So it's kind of like eating an elephant. You got to take a bite a little bit each day. And I think you've done a good job, and we're heading in that right direction. There's no doubt that we are, I think, pretty good stewards of our residents' money, but I do think we need to do more.
Yeah, no, I think you guys did a great job, extremely thorough. I do 100% agree with Kyle. It's like we're planning for something that may not even happen, but there's also a very good likelihood it does happen. And I agree. I don't know what those things are, but just doing whatever we can to prepare for that. Otherwise, no questions. I'm sure we will have more as we continue to dive in, but I think you guys did an awesome job.
But so if the property tax reform passes, is that revenue loss felt next year or the year after? Because on the chart, you have can you go to the next? It's really small.
Yeah, so it's really gonna,
It's showing 2028.
right, it's gonna, everything will be captured, it'll be captured starting as of January of '27, that's when property values will be captured, and that's when the tax rate that'll be used, so it will affect next year's budget process.
Next year's budget process, but
Yeah.
not the
So-
budget
so
we're approving.
100
Not the budget we're approving
Correct.
this year.
Correct.
Not this year's budget.
So, right.
So which is what we, what staff and as we went to the drawing board and obviously talking to other cities is, the general consensus and even what we felt is really trying to address this budget. We've been very conservative. We haven't included any really new initiatives and, could we not do the tree program? Can we not do a couple of those small? Absolutely, we can even cut back a little bit further. And then as we get to where we're talking about, $700,000-800,000, we're talking, it's a lot deeper conversation that I think we all need to have. I think, the conversation about fire assessment, would be a conversation that I think council needs to have. And if we're willing to take on that, I still think that there's still going to be some cuts that we'll still be looking at. I don't think that we want to take a 60% voter that they pass this thing and still not give some kind of relief on the property tax side. But I think ultimately when you look at, 4 years, 3, 4, 5, there's not enough expenditures to cover that in our budget. And I say that pretty confidently without start talking about people.
Yeah, it's really disappointing the position we're in, right? Because like the manager said, we've been working towards setting ourselves up for the future and being able to lower the millage rate. And we're there. We could have lowered we still could. I'm not it's not over till it's over until our September budget hearings, because who knows what happens with litigation, with the property tax reform. There could be an opportunity maybe to lower it depending on how things go between now and September. But, that's a difficult decision to make. Do we give relief for 1 year knowing that the reform could happen and then we'd have to raise the millage rates? And again, after that, we're in a really tough position right now. And it's really disappointing because I was really excited to potentially be able to lower that millage rate this year.
But you can explain it. Based
Oh,
on
no, 100%.
Based on the information.
But it's just, it's disappointing for us because we've worked really hard to get here. But like I said, who knows what happens between now and September. I have just some miscellaneous comments and they're in no order, so I'm kind of all over the place. On the building fund, do those projections account for the fee adjustments that we're going to be making in July?
Yeah, so.
Okay, so that's per what we're going to be seeing next month.
So our plan is to set our fees to cover 100% of our expenditures in there. Because you have to set it by a formula, and we've done that. We've found one, but we're setting those so we recoup 100% of our expenditures.
Okay. And then I do want to pause on the tree canopy enhancement of $75,000. I think if we continue to move forward with the Old Dixie project, there are planned to be trees in that median. I think that can kind of count as tree canopy enhancement. I would really like to see the funds, again, not knowing what the future is right now, that $75,000 can go towards roads down you know, in the future if we need to, sidewalks. So the fact that we are moving forward with Old Dixie for now, and that will be trees with that, I just think we should not include that 75,000 tree canopy enhancement this year. For the roads and sidewalks, do you know what they are for this upcoming year? Can you tell us? That wasn't on the agenda. And I know
Yeah.
Jeremy and I talked about it, and we met today, so we didn't have much time to get all my answers before the meeting, so I apologize.
Absolutely, Mayor. Right now, the plan is to move back to Cuesta Pines. Loxahatchee has some lining they have to complete, and then we're looking to mill and pave to Cuesta Pines West. And at the same time, go back into the country club community and possibly Country Club Circle and/or to Cuesta Circle. And as we move forward, we'll see what those roads look like, but that's what I have on the plan right now.
And what about sidewalks?
Sidewalks, we're going to continue on Willow. We have a lot of non-compliant sidewalk throughout that entire community. And then staff will continue throughout the Cuesta Pines through our operating costs, repairing sidewalk and grinding with our grinding machine.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
But no new sidewalks?
What's that?
No new sidewalks, just
No
maintenance?
connectivity at this point.
Right.
We did have Dover Ditch in there, if we were going to move forward with that.
I don't think that was in our backup either, was
It
it?
wasn't because it's not included in the budget, and I know that Mr. Sartori asked me for it in our one-on-ones, and so I thought, well, let me throw it in the backup just in case the question comes up and he prods me again in front of everybody. So I was ready for it, but this is so there's only been two sidewalk projects, new projects that have been talked about since I've been here and since 2019. One was let me get my bearings, the Tequesta Drive as you go westbound. It's going to be on the north side, kind of in that unincorporated area. And at the time, council decided we didn't really want to spend money in the unincorporated area of Palm Beach County, so we decided we didn't want to do a sidewalk there, so we put in the kind of the buttons so you can cross the street. The only other sidewalk project that's as a new project that's been talked about since I've been here is Dover project, which will help connect, you know, this street because it stops at Constitution Park, and then there's no sidewalk there. There's also several streets that, you know, that connect to that, and even on the other side of Tequesta Drive, there's a couple places that just have a sidewalk and just stops to nowhere. So I think this is kind of the first step, the project to add a sidewalk if we're going to. We have not funded it at this point, but if council wants it in, we can put it in the budget.
Are the residents on Dover requesting it?
Next question.
We have had a couple.
To that end, you know, it's not because I live on Dover, but living on Dover, and you know, we now have people that walk, run. We've got e-bikes, and we have cars, all fighting for space on the road.
Cutting through.
And it stops as you go from my house toward. It stops right at Norfolk, and then it doesn't pick up again until you hit the park itself. So it would get a lot of people. That's a very, very busy street, and that's why it's my desire. I think it's a health, safety, and well-being of our residents to try to connect that.
Yeah, that's been on the radar for at least 3 years, especially when they redid the park, provide that connectivity. So many parents are walking with their children in strollers, and so we've been looking at that. It's just to realize it's more than just sidewalk, right? Because we just place sidewalk out there, there's no place for water to run off. So you're talking about taking back right-of-way and building swales first, and then adding the sidewalk. That's what's going to drive the cost up, and that's the biggest impact to the residents that live on Dover.
Okay, thank you, Doug. And then, speaking of swales, since you brought that up, but this might be more Allison question. Looking through the stormwater fund plans for next year, the 3 swale projects we did this year, are they complete? And if so, were they successful?
They actually are not complete. They're about to be completed this year. We're scheduling the work with the contractor right now.
They'll be done before the fiscal year's over?
Yes. We typically try to wait for the lining and the swale regrading. It's like a special sweet spot before the rain starts too bad, but also a little bit later in the fiscal year to make sure we don't have any major failures of stormwater pipes that we would have to pay for and not have money in the budget to pay for those failures.
Okay, thank you. When it comes to AI, I know that there was, I think mostly for the clerk's office, you guys have been great in utilizing AI, and I think that is fantastic, and we should keep moving forward in that. I am curious, is that saving us any money? Like, it's making us more efficiency, but what benefits are we like garnering from using AI?
Just at this point, it's the efficiency, although, in finance, we may, and this is a conversation, we talk about hedging a little bit. We're doing kind of a light hiring freeze. We had a finance position that just left or is leaving tomorrow. We are going to hold off on hiring that position until at least November, which will put us short. But because of what Jeff has done with AI and being able to utilize AI to help reconcile some of the bills and some of that, we are able to we should be able to absorb some of that work, at least for a temporary period. So it does make us efficiency. In that situation, it's going to save us some money.
Okay, awesome. I mean, that's what I like to hear. That's the point of AI, right? It should obviously make us more efficient, but hopefully save some more money as well in the long run.
So I want to just go back and say that, we're going to do a hiring freeze. It's not going to be like ironclad hiring freeze, like, we lose a police officer, we're not going to fill that position. We're going to really look at those critical positions still, but some of the work that we can absorb, even though it might be tough, we're going to try to do at least until November just to see, because there's nothing worse than, hiring somebody just to fire them. I mean, so.
Well, that costs us money too, though.
Yeah.
So, that's just bad morale, but then it costs us money.
Right.
Just so council knows, I did request the manager to send the general fund operating cost history line graph, adding a revenue line item. I thought that would be good to see on there, to see how that's trended, especially for public transparency with all the rhetoric that we've been hearing from the state. I'd like to really see where that lands. On the reserves, I know I've brought this up in the past. 3 months is our target, but I think it's, if there's a catastrophic event, we're going to need more than 3 months of money to front before we start seeing any relief from FEMA or other sources. So I know there's been past council members that have said it looks like we're hoarding taxpayer dollars, but I just want to throw that out there again that, we have capital projects that we're going to want to get done. Even if property tax relief doesn't pass, we're probably going to use reserves for some capital projects. But we're based on what happened on the West Coast. The past couple hurricane seasons. I'm talking, and Jeremy had reached out to some of the city managers over there. I mean, they blew through their 3 months in a month. So we're going to need that money. And then I don't know. I know FEMA was talking about raising their threshold for reimbursement. Did that happen?
It did happen, I think.
So that's official?
Yeah.
So that was my other concern, because if there's, again, a catastrophic situation, the county is going to, exceed that threshold. But if there's a smaller event, which we've had in the past, where there's a tornado in Delray or Milton, maybe would have meet the threshold. But we've had some damage, and we've had, activate the EOC. We might not get reimbursed for that now because the threshold's been raised. So I would love to know, is it official? Is it?
Yeah, it did pass. I know when we looked at the number, and I can't remember off the top of my head, most of the stuff, like when we had those tornadoes last year, and even a couple of these programs have all, exceeded the county threshold. Some of the smaller stuff, that's the concerning part, like you're saying, is that if we activate and we don't really get hit by a lot, especially a lot of like debris cleanup and things like that, we're not gonna be reimbursed for those overtime costs or any of that. So we'll have to front those and not receive recoup those costs if it's minor.
Right.
So.
Again, another reason that, having those reserves in more than 3 months is wise. And I'm just throwing this out as a refresher from last year. It's all things we need to consider, especially if the property tax reform passes. And other kind of minor things that we could consider, I'm curious about too, if we have to pivot with the tax reform. Right now we're budgeting for like credit card fees and charges because we pay those. A lot of businesses, of course, charge that 3% convenience fee or whatever it's called if you use your credit card. Anywhere we could save money, we should be looking into. But I don't know what's common practice. Like, do other cities always absorb that cost, or some cities charging a convenience fee? I'd be curious on that if staff can look into that. Because again, like, we might need to be thinking where we can save money anywhere. And then my last comment is, if staff hasn't already, I think you all know I'm on the board for Florida League of Cities, and we had a board meeting 2 weeks ago, and they really reviewed again the grant assistance program that FLC offers, and it's really grown. They really enhanced it, and I don't know if staff's looked into it in the past, but I just want to read some statistics that they gave to us. There's been $221 million in grant funding applied for by FLC member cities. $100 million is currently under management, and over 10,000 grants are accessible through to member cities through the expanded access. So if staff hasn't already, I think it might be beneficial to look into the FLC grant assistance program and get familiarized with that sooner than later, because that might be a tool that should start utilizing more to help us find grants. I know our staff is great at it. I know we have some grant writers that we use as well, but I just want to throw it out there because I think any resources that we have at our disposal will be really good to use to find other funding sources. All right, that's all I have. Is there any other council comments or questions?
I'm just thinking out of the box. I'm thinking of Northcom and how we kind of joined other municipalities to consolidate a service. Is there any other services that we can think about consolidating into other municipalities coming together in some aspects or another? So just continue to think out of the box. So what could those things be?
Our two, just for discussion, our two major ones would be police and fire. We do have in our charter that it has to be approved by voters for us to contract that out. I don't think unless Citizen has changed, I don't think there's ever been a desire to contract those out. So those are our two biggest expenses. I mean, if you start looking at, code compliance is a popular one that sometimes gets shared, not a lot. But I mean, our costs are $100,000 total for that department. It's not, and so yeah, we can look at those things. I don't think there's going to be a lot of meat on the bones for the rest of them. But I hear you. We'll look at anything we can. I got a lot of things in the notebook that if this thing happens, we're going to bring back to council for consideration. So.
I think everything's on the table.
Yeah.
I'm assuming at your managers' meetings, you guys are talking about this stuff.
Yeah, we have the same panic as everybody does.
Start thinking of solutions.
I think, our discussion has been around, there's a lot of cities that are going to be considering, that special assessment. I know North Palm's they're going to pass 3 of them if it passes. They're waiting, which I don't know that we want to wait, but they're going to be, we already have 2 of them. We have the refuse and recycling. We have that as a non-ad valorem now. They talking about stormwater. Some of those things are already built into their general fund, and they're also going to consider a fire assessment. And I think generally along the area, fire assessment is the topic of conversation, because you have the ability, even if you pass that you have the ability not to charge the whole thing, and you can charge by a percentage. You can move that around with your millage rate, lower your millage rate, and so there's quite a few advantages to doing that, especially with property tax reform. That's a big one. So.
Right, and then people are paying for the service too, that they might, be receiving, where the way it's set up now, if the 700 something plus homes don't pay taxes anymore, they're not paying for the service. So that kind of makes it a little even across the board for something like that. Okay, anything else? No? And there is no public here, so I am not taking public comment tonight. With that, can we get a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Aye.